Hello and welcome to NJBIZ Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Kanige. My guest today is Brian Higgins. He is the founder and president of Group 77, which is a security and public safety consulting firm. Brian, welcome.
Thank you.
I should also mention that you are a former police chief in Bergen County and that you do teach at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I mean, you're a recognized expert, as far as I can tell, on issues of security and public safety. So I wanted to start today. I want to talk about a lot of different things, but I wanted to start with hospitals because one of your colleagues sent me a study from a nurses group that showed that more than 82% of the respondents to that had experienced violence at work. And that struck me because we think of hospitals as sort of these sanctuaries for healing, and yet apparently there's a lot of difficulties. What is it about hospitals that make them either vulnerable or susceptible, or both, to these kinds of incidents?
I think it's the very nature of hospitals. They have to be places where people can go in very quickly.
Right.
The treatment that people are seeking quite often are very timely. They need to do it very quickly.
Right.
And then it tends to be a very emotional place. People are there because they have issues, they've been injured, or they have loved ones who are there for health reasons. Quite often there are portions in hospitals where you have psychiatric units. Emotions are running very high. So you have this almost a perfect storm. You have this perfect storm of emotions, of being open and accessible at the same time. Right. This potential for crime where you have to keep it secure.
Okay. Yes. I mean, hospitals, as you say, by their nature, they need to be welcoming, because if you have a loved one who's being treated for especially a serious disease or an injury, you want to be able to go and see them. And yet there is a need for security. So how does a hospital balance those things? What are the main issues that they have to deal with?
So the main issue is really the protection of the patients. That's their number one concern, right? When a patient comes in, they're responsible for not only their health, but their safety. So they are responsible for keeping people healthy and safe, while at the same time protecting their staff. Their staff now become the targets when people are emotional, upset. Now, something as simple as rushing in to see a loved one and a nurse or an orderly stands in your way,
right.
It could become violent.
Okay.
And then there are other issues. Drugs have to be secured, medical equipment. There's radiological material in hospitals that all have to be secured, while at the same time allowing for this free movement of people.
Right. Now, I'm guessing that the emergency department is probably one of the sort of hot spots for these kinds of things. Am I right about that? Because I mean, there you have people coming in, and yes, that's where tension seems to be really high, where people are possibly in distress. Is that an accurate way of describing it?
It is. It's ground zero. It's where people come in who are injured. Family members and others are emotional. Even the injured may be emotional. At the same time, I've read a lot of studies or reports of what started out on the street resulted in an injury, then follows into the emergency room. So it can be a very dangerous place to be.
Okay. And are there other areas in the hospital? I mean, you mentioned the drugs, for example. I mean, pharmacies, that's probably a place where you're going to run into some trouble. Are there other places like that in the hospital that stand out?
Yes, of course. Quite often the psychiatric units, people are there for those reasons. Most hospitals will have an area where they can lock somebody who's either being detained or the police are waiting for. But then there are those areas where when somebody is clinging to life and the family members get very emotional. So those high stress areas, the ICUs, the NIC units where children go, all areas where emotions are running high are probably those places where the danger is most.
Okay. Now, I mentioned that study from the nurses before. Is that sort of typical? Or do you hear a lot of those? I mean, and you mentioned some other studies. Do you hear a lot of these kinds of things, a lot of these kinds of stories in your work?
Yes. When I was chief in Bergen County, we were responsible for policing of what was then Bergen Regional Medical Center. When I first started, it was Bergen Pines. And we met regularly with the nurses union, the orderlies, the security, because they were constantly the first line that's physically assaulted when somebody's violent. And the people who are violent quite often don't even realize what they're doing, right? They have psychiatric issues, they're under the influence. So it's
Right.
a very difficult balancing act.
Hmm. Okay, and that actually leads to the next question: is that who's going to be primarily responsible for these for security? Local law enforcement. How much do medical professionals? How much training do they need? Doctors and nurses, for example, on top of their workloads, do they have to do all of this? Where does it come from, or is it just something that has to be? I mean, hospitals and chief executives will often say that it's from the top down. Everybody has to buy in. Where does the responsibility lie mostly in your view?
At the end of the day, it is the top, the upper echelon, the people who run the hospitals. We've seen a change in the last several decades where more and more hospitals are going for profit.
Right.
So at the end of the day, they have a responsibility as a business to make sure that they keep people safe.
Sure.
Even if it's a non-profit or government-run hospital, they have a real responsibility to keep people safe. So it really does start at the top. It needs to be part of their business plan.
Okay.
The cost of security. Now, where that comes from really varies all over the country. You go to New York City, and they have their own police force,
Okay.
the New York City Hospital Police. I've seen areas where local police are brought in as well. There are some models in the United States where they actually have a police force that is private within the hospital. So
Mhm.
through state laws, a guard company will get the contract, but those officers actually go to a police academy, and they have within the property of the medical facility, they have the authority of police officers.
Okay. Well, you actually anticipated my next question, which was, are there any models out there that you can use? Is that something that New Jersey hospitals, for example, should consider doing, having their own police forces, or is that
It
is
is.
that something that only large systems can afford?
So in New Jersey, it's rather unique. We don't have a lot of hospitals that are run by the government,
Right.
right? They're all networks,
Yes.
and however the network's structured. So it's going to be the responsibility of the network, and the network will have to make that decision based on the threat, how severe are the issues in their hospital, and of course there's the cost factor,
Right.
right? Hiring the police as opposed to having your own guard force or armed guard force is much different, depending on where you reside or where your
Okay.
business resides.
All right. And just one more thing on this are New Jersey hospitals particularly vulnerable or susceptible, given the fact that, especially in the northern part of the state, it's very densely populated. They're very busy. They've got a lot of different kinds of things going on. Are New Jersey hospitals a particular problem, or is it sort of the same way across the country?
I would say New Jersey does have the issue you mentioned, being more densely populated, close to New York City. But at the same time, if you look at a map, a crime map of hospitals and medical facilities, New Jersey is not top.
Oh, okay.
They're apparently doing a pretty good job of keeping the facility secure.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Just a couple more things before I let you go, just in more general terms. I'm curious also about other kinds of workplaces. I mean, we just had the shooting in Manhattan recently, where someone walked in with what looked like, to me at least, a very large gun, and a lot of people wondered, how did he get in there? What leads to that kind of breakdown? I mean, how does something like that happen, and what should buildings be doing to prevent it?
So how it gets to that, really, there are multiple layers. And you have to think about, especially in workplace violence, active shooter situations, the police are the last line of defense.
Okay.
Particularly somebody like this who had a criminal history and a mental health history. There were layers of services that didn't work.
Okay.
And they had to fail for him to get to the point where he arms himself and walks into a place of business.
Mm-hmm.
So there are multiple layers here. And then ultimately the police or security are thrown into a situation they're not expecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone like this, whatever his motivation, is under the radar. He's not communicating with anybody. There's no sign it's going to happen. And you think of all the laws that were violated on his way into New York City, right? He passed through New Jersey with a firearm that you can go to jail
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. Goes into New York City with that same firearm. He walks through the city armed with this firearm, then walks in and begins shooting people. So all the laws really didn't prevent anything.
Right.
So workplace has to be prepared for active shooter situations in
Okay.
multiple layers.
Okay.
The physical setup. I was there in that lobby um, a day after doing some interviews.
Okay.
I think configuration of lobbies, entrance points, and the response has to be evaluated continuously.
Okay, well, that's actually an interesting point because I mean, I worked in New York City for decades, and particularly after September 11th, security in most of the buildings, in fact, all the buildings that I went into, was extraordinarily tight. And I worked in the financial district. Before you even got into the building, there was a checkpoint outside that you had to
Right.
prove that you belonged there. When you got inside, you had to tap your badge, put your bag through an X-ray machine like an airport, walk through a magnetometer, a metal detector. I mean, the security was really tight. Now that was the financial district, and it's obviously a target. But is that what we're heading to now? Is that kind of thing? And if so, you mentioned the cost with regard to hospitals. What is it? What are the financial implications for building owners and businesses when if that's what security has to look like, or does it have to look like that?
Well, I do believe, and we have this discussion in schools as well, that parents,
Right.
educators don't want schools to look like
Right.
jails.
Right.
But at the same time, we have very smart people in the world with the latest technology that can come up with ways to increase security without making it look like um, a jail facility. When you think of
Okay.
the turnstiles, when you go into a building, it used to be these three arms
Right.
metal. Now
Mhm.
they're clear plastic. They're adorned with metal. So
Mhm.
there are ways we can increase security while at the same time not making it look like you're locked down
Okay.
in a jail, right? Um, but unfortunately, we're about 2 weeks out from the last shooting in Manhattan, and already the conversation is waned.
Right.
So in that first week or two, our company gets a lot of calls. Can you come in and do an assessment? Can you help us look at what next level of security? And those calls are beginning to fall off already.
Okay. Yeah.
So, it always goes in cycles. If we see several other shootings afterwards, high profile, then there'll be this concern. But unfortunately, it ebbs and flows, and finance does have a significant uh, impact on
Right.
these things. Right,
Certainly.
security can be very expensive, and there isn't. If you never have an active shooter or a serious crime issue at your facility, it almost seems like you could do better things with that money.
Right.
So it's a difficult balancing act, and there is a financial factor to it.
Yeah. Right. And given that, I mean, you mentioned the breakdowns that had to happen that led to what happened in Manhattan. Is it fair to make the building, the security, sort of the as you say, as you put, the last line of defense? I mean, I guess there's no way of preventing everybody from failing the way they did in that instance. But do business owners really and building owners have to be prepared to be that last line of defense?
They do. They
Okay.
do. They really have no choice.
Hmm.
Statistically, you will probably never be involved in an active shooter situation.
Right.
But when one occurs, it will be very devastating. We've seen examples of active shooters events occurring, and people can't go back in that facility, and they raise the facility. It's very devastating, and the long-term effects will go on for many years.
Right.
So I think business owners have this responsibility. It goes back before our country was founded. Case law, right? The innkeeper's responsibility. When you're traveling and you stopped in an inn, the innkeeper was found responsible for keeping you safe to a certain
Okay.
level.
Mm-hmm.
That passes on to all types of businesses, whether it's a healthcare facility, tech company, or otherwise.
Okay. So these folks really have to think of it as an investment because, as you say, if something like this happens, that's not going to be good for business either.
Oh, it's extremely devastating, but here's where it's very difficult. If you have a great security program and you actually stopped an event from occurring, you may never know that.
Right.
So you don't know how successful your security is, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know what your return on your investment is in that security. But if you never had an event and yet you still have a high level of security, consider yourself very fortunate and consider it a good investment.
Okay. All right. One more thing before I let you go. We have a big event coming up in New Jersey, the FIFA World Cup next year. There've been a lot of big events at the Meadowlands, the Super Bowl, concerts of various sorts. Just this past summer, the Club World Cup and English Premiership. summer series, but this one is really big. The kind of attention that it's going to get all around the world is probably greater than anything that's ever happened there before. What worries you about when you hear that? I mean, what do you think of in terms of security? Is it the transportation? Is it the building itself? What would keep you up at night if you and maybe you are helping out the security there? But what are the biggest concerns that folks should have about that?
So it's all the above.
Okay.
In an event like this, what's unique compared to the others, as you said before, there are events that occur every day at MetLife Stadium,
Right. Mm-hmm.
whether it's NFL events or concerts or Monster Jam. They do a very good job.
Okay.
In the NFL, every year they issue best practices that they find that are helpful, and many of those best practices come from MetLife Stadium. That's how good their level of security is.
Okay. All right.
But in this instance, it's going to be more than just MetLife. I know we're talking about New Jersey, but it's going to be all over the country, Mexico, Canada, right around us with our neighbors. So in this event, we're not just bringing the typical, I'll call it typical security concerns. We're bringing all of those issues that those other countries have that are represented in the World Cup.
Right. Right.
And we did. I actually worked the World Cup in 1994 when
I
came here.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same attention as it is now.
Right.
I think FIFA has grown quite a bit.
Yes.
I think the attention on soccer and the demographics in the United States has changed, where many more people here in the U.S. are focused on soccer.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be on top of all the other issues of crowds, bringing crowds together, people getting there, the transportation getting there, being able to get help if something were to happen through the roadways, getting people to hospitals. But you have these other concerns, these technological concerns. What if someone were, we had the event down in New Orleans where the power went out during a Super Bowl. Could somebody hack the grid?
Right.
Drones are a big concern. So as the world evolves and threats tend to morph, we add that on top of the fact that we're bringing all the security concerns of those who live in those countries where FIFA teams are representing.
Okay. You mentioned the crowds and yes, the diverse nature of the crowds. I'm also wondering if the fact that, for example, the final, which will be played at MetLife Stadium, is going to be viewed around the world. I mean, that's the focus of it. Many Americans probably don't understand how interested the rest of the world is going to be in that particular game. Does that kind of high profile event present any kind of special problems because so many people are paying attention to it, because there's a potentially huge audience?
Yes. When we're considering, let's say, terrorism, one of the goals of a terrorist is the iconic nature or the international attention, right? So if you attack an area nobody's heard of, it doesn't have the same impact as attacking Times Square. So if you're successful on an attack in an international event like FIFA in the United States, that will go a long way to help their cause, at least in their mind. But not only do we have I'll call it the routine or typical security measures at these venues, you have another layer here. The task force that the president created consists of the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security. So these are very high profile organizations with a very unique set of skills and technology that we don't even know exists.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I don't want to leave people on such a down note, because you did mention that MetLife is actually pretty good at this, and I'm just as I think about the area around MetLife Stadium, it seems like it should be relatively easy to secure. It's not like it's not sitting in the middle of a city, for example. Does that make it any easier to keep out the unwanted element, as it were?
There are two things. Yes, the fact that it's not in an right in the middle of a city. Right. And there's a little more space. The fact that the state police and MetLife Security have been doing this for so many years, there hasn't been this turnover. The fact that it's one agency that runs the security is going to be very helpful, and they're going to be the driving force in the security. And all those agencies I mentioned before, the task force, they're going to be a support for MetLife Security.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Brian Higgins, founder and president of Group 77, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.